everyone. Welcome to the How to Podcast series. I have with me somebody that I love hearing from in my email box. It comes through as SpeakPipe messages from my guest today, my guest co-host, and every time I get to go through and listen to his messages, I'm always laughing, smiling, encouraged because he's a great person. And he's got a great podcast. Went through a little bit of a rebrand as we've kind of gone through the days together. And the beautiful thing is, he actually listens to the show, which makes me quite happy. And he's recording with me from a very unique place, which we'll get into in a second. Anthony is here on the podcast. Anthony, welcome as my guest co-host. So glad to have you here.
Oh, Dave, thank you for having me here. I appreciate your show. I appreciate all the stuff I've learned from it. I think I mentioned to you in SpeakPipe, I just started at episode 1 and I finally caught up, except for, how do you say it? Nanopodo.
Yeah. Napod Pomo. Yeah, there you go.
Yes, that started up. And so now I'm all behind again.
Yeah, there's a few episodes coming your way. Yeah, that's great.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, so ton of questions. Podcast. It started out as, have you ever wondered what happened? And I racked my brain looking for a name. And I'm thinking that everybody goes through this. So I came up with that. And then I started getting little tidbits of feedback. One was from you, where you mentioned, that's a little bit long. And I got some feedback from a coworker at work. I mentioned to just a group of friends, and one of them said, "Oh, you have a podcast. What's it about?" And so I told her, and she's like, "Oh, is it like conspiracy theory stuff?" And she had that little twang in her voice going, and to be honest, it started out that way. And I've taken several turns along the way. Ton of Questions podcast did not start out what it is today. It started out as an idea to bring things that were questionable, just conspiracy theory stuff. But I found it was going to be a whole lot more interesting when I got into, and this was advice that I got from you, is what's your why?
Yeah.
What's your why? And one of the things that I like to do is create curiosity and to teach. So that's how I got here from, have you ever wondered what happened, to what, and I really do like it. It's Ton of Questions podcast at tonofquestions.com.
So what changed with your why then from the initial episodes when you first started to today?
Really, when I listened to your episode number 1 a couple of times over and over again, it's like, what is your why? The bringing things to light, I kind of like that idea. I like to dig, I like to research, but really what I like to do is I like to teach. I love when that light bulb moment comes on. In my day job, I'm an instructor for adult classes in industrial, nuclear, radiological, and all kinds of different safety, electrical safety. And when I talk with those people, what I really enjoy is when the light bulb comes on. And so that's what I want to do with my podcast. And that's what I realized after listening to your episode 1 a couple times, is why, right? Bring that curiosity to light and turn the light bulb on.
Nice. Yeah, and I think that's a great place to start. And I think your why is the thing that keeps you motivated, keeps you going, and lets you know if you're meeting your target. If you don't know what your target is, you're never going to hit it. So you really kind of have to hone in on that and understand it. And with your background and things you've done in the past, you know it all about targets and all of that with your world that you've come from. And one thing I love is you shared on one of your episodes about the piano wire or the guitar string thing, and you talked about the sub and the submarine and the fact that you obviously tell it way better than I ever could do. Could you just tell us that story again? I told my wife, she's like, what? So yeah, we got to hear that. Come on.
Absolutely. Okay, so life on board a submarine is kind of crazy. You've got your whole entire biosphere in that little tube, and we've got the first 2 submarines that I went on were ballistic missile submarines. So their job is to go out, and there are many of them out in the ocean right now, to go out and remain hidden. And should, heaven forbid, World War III ever occur, they launch.
Yeah.
So submarines start out on the surface, and obviously when they submerge to go hidden, the deeper they go, the more pressure is on those hulls. And the rule of thumb, and this is true for scuba diving, it's true for anything that you go underwater in the ocean, is for every 100 feet that you go down, there's an additional 44 pounds per square inch on the surface of whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're scuba diving and you're down 100 feet, you've got 44 pounds of weight over every square inch of your body. Well, the same thing is true for a submarine. And as it goes deeper and deeper, and all I'm allowed to say, even still to this day, is that they can go in excess of 400 feet. So what we would do is for testing and for training, we would go as deep as we were allowed to go. And when we dive for either testing or training, before we went down deep, we would tie if somebody came prepared, they'd bring piano wire because that works the best. But if we had to, we'd bring some string that just didn't like stretch or whatever. We'd tie it across the hull when we were at the surface. And then by the time we went down to X number of feet, the pressure on that hull had pressed it down so that there was so much slack in that string, it would just dangle. And then we go back up and it would tighten back up and you could pull it like a piano wire or a guitar cord.
Wow. That's amazing. Like, it's with all the stuff that happened around the Titanic and that sub that went down with the people on to go take a look. I'm like, to hear your story and kind of your wisdom and knowledge from your perspective, to see that in the news, that probably had a spot for you as you kind of watched all that unfold, right?
Yeah, I was watching it unfold and I was baffled when I learned that that hull was made out of, I forget the material. It's not metal. It was like a Kevlar type of material. Yeah. And it was designed for that depth, but it was only designed for 1 or 2 dives to that depth without being tested.
Mm-hmm.
And so they were supposed to do all this testing that was very, very costly. And they didn't do that testing. They just kept diving.
Yeah.
And the wear and tear on it wasn't designed to do that.
Yeah. It's amazing. How long would you be away roughly out, serving? Like, would you be gone for months at a time, years at a time? Like, how long would you be gone?
Well, okay, so there's the 2 types of submarines, the Fleet Ballistic Missile Submarine, or SSBN. They're pretty much like clockwork, 3 months out, 3 months in.
Okay.
And the first part of that 3 months is a maintenance period. So let's say and everybody understands in the United States Navy, it's the blue crew and the gold crew. So let's say you're the blue crew, I'm the gold crew. You guys pull in, we show up, and that might mean that we're in the same home port or we had to fly somewhere. We show up, you guys give us turnover, you leave, we take over, we do maintenance. So anywhere from 1 or 2 days up to 30 days of just nonstop maintenance. We're talking working 36-hour shifts. Wow. We're talking getting very little sleep and maybe a little bit of time away from the ship. And then after that refit is over, we go out to sea, and we're out to sea anywhere from 3 months to 2 months, out just submerged underwater, no daytime, no daylight, everything just inside that little sphere.
Wow. See, that's amazing.
Yeah. I've heard there's lots of changes. When I was out, we ran on 6-hour shifts. And so your first 6-hour shift, you'd be operating whatever equipment. If you were a sonar operator, you'd be operating the sonar gear. If you were a machinist mate like I was, you'd be operating turbines and pumps and different things and nuclear reactor stuff and whatever. You get off watch and you'd have your training. Like if you were still trying to qualify, you'd do that for 6 hours, or maintenance or cleaning, whatever. Then you get 6 hours of sleep and you'd start it all over again. What I've learned just recently reading an article is that they've shifted to 8-hour shifts. So now it's more like a 24-hour day instead of an 18-hour day. It's still, you're just completely self-contained. And I've been underwater for over 100 days straight. And
wow.
The other type of submarine is a fast attack. And the other side, the enemy has the same thing. They've got their missile submarines and they've got their fast attacks. The goal of a fast attack is to go out and hunt and find the other guy's missile platforms. And on those, we might be we get word, hey, we're going to go out. We're only going to be out for 7 days, and then we'll be back in. Well, 3 days out, the mission changes, and now we're out for 92 days or whatever. So yeah, it was crazy.
Wow. It's amazing. So we're really going deep on this, which I like. So this is great. Okay, so talk podcasting now. Like you start your show. Well, first of all, you find the How to Podcast series, which I don't even know how that happened. Can you explain how you found the show? Because what your answer is, whatever you say, I want to do more of. That's the reason I'm asking.
Oh, well, so I'm going to back up just a little bit.
Yeah.
For many, many years, I've always thought that I wanted to have a website with a blog and sit there and tippity type out my whatevers. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. Well, that just never came to fruition. And then a very close friend of mine, I used to be a very close friend, but now just acquaintance, still good friends. She started a podcast. And I thought, wow, she did an amazing job with that. And then I thought, maybe I'd like to do that. I've got a microphone. I've got a good computer. All the gear's sitting around. So I started poking around, and then it kind of fell by the wayside. But I started binge listening to her podcast. And I thought, I wonder what it takes to make a podcast. So I type into Google, how do you make a podcast? Well, 2 podcasts came up, yours and another one. I don't remember the other one's name. And even if I did, I wouldn't say it. I didn't care too much for it. I listened to first 5 or 6 episodes. And on episode 3 or 4, somewhere in there, this guy was talking about your avatar and monetization and just hit it running from the beginning and tell them whatever they need to be told so that they'll buy your stuff. Not really too much interested in that. Well, then I went back and it was still the same web page that was open, and yours was right up there by his. And So I clicked on it. So it was like how to podcast, and the how to podcast series came up. Yeah. So that was that. And I started listening, and then I started dabbling, and I had the notion from a couple of other things that I've heard or read, get 8 or 10 episodes running and then launch your first one and put 2 or 3 up from the beginning. Well, I'm kind of impulsive sometimes. So I was like, I've got 6 episodes. I'm going to put 5 of them up there, and I've got the other ones ready to start recording. So that's what I'll do. And that's what I did. And here we are.
That's great. Well, I'm glad you found the show. And it's kind of all right in the name, right? So like, it's very obvious what the show is about. So that's kind of what I was hoping for. And I actually had a similar comment from somebody in England who found the show, and they just typed into Google how to podcast, and bang, there it was. And I'm like, well, okay, that's working. So I'm going to keep doing that, which is great. But yeah, I love kind of hearing how people find the show. Again, as people come on your show and as you interact with people and they tell you they found your show, make sure you ask, because whatever their answer is, you need to do more of that. So if it's Instagram, great. Then I'm going to go in on Instagram. If it's being found on Google, great. Whatever that is, you just need to go deep on that, because it's really going to help you grow.
Yeah. And one of the things that really helped me along was not just the mechanical side of the things that you teach, but it's the mindset, or I can't think of the right word, the way that you come across. I've not ever heard I've listened to, I don't know how many, I think I'm up to 100. I'm up to the beginning of November when you hit the nanopod. I still can't say the acronym. Say it again.
The NaPodPoMo.
NaPodPoMo. I need to write that down. I'm up to that point. And wow. I've never heard you say a single solitary critical word of anybody. You will provide feedback, but you'll do it with such a kind and gentle manner that teaches people how to improve stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, I could have the worst audio in the world, and you wouldn't say, hey buddy, your audio stinks. You should buy this or do that. But you'll come around and it's something that I'm trying to mimic in my own way. I'm kind of a gruff, hit you between the eyes kind of person.
Yeah.
So that's something that I'm trying to emulate. That's the right word I'm looking for.
I just find that there's a lot of judgment in the space, and I don't understand why anyone would set themselves up as the expert to look down on a new podcaster and say, if you don't do it my way, you're not doing it right, because you're going to do it your way and it's going to work for you. And there's no way that you can fit into my shoes and do life wearing my shoes. You wear your own shoes. So, I want to encourage that in everyone, that, you can find your own path in podcasting. No one's going to come and take your show away from you. So you can do whatever you want, right?
Sorry, I'm typing. Can you hear my keyboard when I type?
No.
Okay.
So, fine.
I just typed in, when you talk to people who are listening to your show, be sure to ask them how they found you, where they found you.
Yeah, it really, really does help to kind of know. It's great research. And the moment that you can interact with your audience, and that's why I set up my SpeakPipe, which you use frequently, and I love that when it pops up in my email, is it opens the door for communication. Because when we're first starting out, we do this recordings, we send them out in the world, and we hope that somebody resonates with them. We hope that somebody, connects with it or finds our show. But we really don't know in those first few episodes if anyone's going to listen. And we just keep doing it and hoping and praying that somebody finds our stuff. And the moment they do, to have that person reach out to you and leave you a message like a SpeakPipe or an email or a comment on your social media, whatever that is, that's a moment where somebody's done a very heavy lift to engage with you as a host that needs to be rewarded and acknowledged, because by doing so, it opens the door for your listeners to go, wait, Anthony's a real person. And if I reach out to Anthony, he's going to respond to me. And that's something unique in a space where we really don't know the character of the host of our favorite show. We hear their voices, but we don't really know what they're like as people. So when we reach out and we take a shot in the dark saying, maybe they'll respond, I don't really know, but I really like their show, and then they respond, you're like, whoa, that's the host of the show. Responded to me personally, not in some mass email to the world. He responded to, Anthony said, hi, Dave, this is Anthony from the show. So glad you left me a message. I really appreciate you. That's like, I'm going to tell everybody that Anthony's show is amazing. And then if for some reason, somehow my voice appears on your podcast where you ask a question and I answer, maybe through SpeakPipe or something like that, and then my voice is now on your show. It's like, what is going on? That is so cool. Now I'm on a podcast, and now I'm going to tell all my friends, listen to me, I'm on a show. It's so exciting, especially for people who don't really understand podcasting. Maybe they're just a listener. They don't have any idea of becoming a podcaster. But the fact that their voice is now playable on this magical world of podcasting, it's such a cool experience. So for you and your show, just keep building up that engagement. And then when somebody reaches out, over-deliver in response and showing your appreciation to them, because your listeners are watching how you interact with that message, because they are like, you're like the testing ground, and that if you really respond well to that person, that's going to open the door for me as a listener then to feel safe to reach out to you as well because of how you treated that other person, right?
Yeah. And that's another thing that I really gained from your show is I've heard you say a number of times, when this is and I'm probably going to blow the exact quote, what I get to meet all kinds of people. And I've heard you talk about having guests on the show that there's no way you could afford their hourly rate, but right, they're interested in being on your show.
Yeah. It's crazy.
And so I never really considered that as part of the why, but it kind of grew into there is after a meeting with you that first time, it was like, yeah, this is really cool. And I want to develop that in other places as well. True to your word, you said, hey, leave me a message on my SpeakPipe and I'll create an episode just about your show. And then all of a sudden I see Anthony Vivino on your it was Have You Ever Wondered What Happened? But Ton of Questions podcast was on your show, and it was an episode just about mine.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how can you get any better than that?
It's amazing. And it also then helps you as a newer podcaster to get in front of an audience and they get to hear about your show. So I really want to throw a spotlight on everyone who listens to this podcast, but in that I want your show to grow And the fact that you get to be in front of my audience is better than just starting out with like on your own with no support. Your voice, your show's on this podcast, my show shows up on your podcast. We're helping each other in the whole process, right?
Yeah. Oh, and I gotta throw a shout out. One of your podcasts, I don't remember which number it was, but I was just in a bummer mood that morning going to work, and you had I forget her first name, but Linsome was her last name, and her podcast is Winsome with the Linsums. And you said something to her that I've actually said the same thing to other people in a different world. I can hear your smile, is what you said to her. And I was able to hear that too, coming through the speakers of my truck. So years and years and years ago, like we're talking late 90s, I was in tech support, and I was training a lot of people how to be good, telephone technical support. And I said, they can hear your smile. Yeah. Just because you're on a telephone, they can hear your smile. Yeah. And so with, I can't remember her first name, but Winsome with the Winsome, I could hear her smile coming across.
Steve.
So, but shout out to that lady. She just you could hear her smile. And so that's what there's many things about your podcast that I like to emulate. And then episode 60 with Fritz was his last name. It was much longer. That was a very important facet to what I'm doing and how I'm doing it right now is coming to you live from Studio F, meaning EF or EX as in excursion. I'm recording out of my truck right now. So
see, I love it. That's so cool because when he came on, he broke all the rules for me. When I hear other people in podcasting, they're like, never do this, never do this, never do this. And he did all of those. And he sounded great. You sound amazing. And I'm like, well, okay, so that guru was wrong for whatever reason, because I'm listening to you and I'm listening to Fritz, and the two of you sound amazing in the environment you're in. And you have the best view ever while you're recording. You're not in some tiny little room with the furnace behind you chugging away, or somebody flushing a toilet, the pipe behind you. Nobody's doing the laundry. You're out in the middle of beautiful countryside, being able to record, and you have your own space. You're portable. You can go anywhere. It's amazing, and you do sound great.
Yeah, for everybody that's listening to this show, don't get delayed. Don't do what I did because you didn't think like you could do it by all the rules that everybody else plays by.
Right.
Don't worry about playing by the rules that everybody else says that you have to play by. I'm sitting in my truck. I'm looking out over Southeast Idaho, Idaho Falls. When the sun sets, it'll be a beautiful, not metropolis, but lit city. There's 3 buttes way out on the desert. There's mountains up on the horizon with a lot of snow on top. There's a little bit of snow on the ground where I'm at, but I'm not at a very high elevation. You don't need a special sound booth. You don't have to follow the rules. Try it. If it sounds good, if it doesn't, figure out what you need to do to make it sound better.
Anthony, what else from a podcast perspective are you not hearing? Give me some ideas of some other stuff that we can talk about on the show.
On your show, it's hard because I don't know yet what I don't know.
Okay.
And I love the interactions with all the different types of personalities that you bring on. It's not I'm going to go to Dave Campbell and listen to cookie cutter, all the same kind of people, white collar males between 30 and 50 who, right. Yeah. So you've got a large cross section of different types of people. You've got people into sports. You've got people into like me with nuclear power and nerd stuff. So I like the diversity. So I'm hard pressed to say, Dave, I think you're missing this detail because I don't know what I don't know.
Yeah.
And I think that's another point for people listening to the show is you don't need to have a college degree. You don't need to have a background in audio broadcasting or any of that. Grab a microphone. Like you've said many times, Dave, grab that microphone, use your cell phone if you want to. There's better microphones out there, but you don't need to go out and spend a truckload of money to gather all the equipment. Another piece of great advice that you give is talking about your stats. Tell me what you say about your stats, because I love the way you put it.
Is that about watching them grow? Is that part of it? Yeah. Just staring at them is not going to make them any bigger, right? So for me, the biggest thing I love to do is I would rather spend time with you one-on-one than staring at my numbers and hoping they grow. Because by spending time with you as a listener together in community, we're building a friendship that is stronger than some faceless number, because that number can be inflated. It could be incorrect. It's kind of a shot in the dark. It's not really something that I could really hang my hat on as a true stat, because there's so many ways to manipulate the stat. And I just find that when we're chasing that number, we lose sight of who our audience really is. And I go back to one of my episodes where I talk about what's your minimum number of listeners that you would podcast for. Would you podcast for one person? Would you do that, or is that like embarrassing to you? Would you stand in front of a room full of with only one person there and go, "Oh, I'm so sorry for wasting your time. There should be more people here. Let's stop early and go home. I'm so embarrassed for you as a listener that there's no one else here." And you're like, wait, to that person, you're the only person they've shown up for. They've made a decision to be there with you when they could have been doing a million other things, but they chose to be there for you. So in that moment, they are the most important person. So would you podcast for the audience of one? There's not a lot of people saying this, which I find odd, but I would podcast for one person if one person's life was different.
Correct. And I would do that one light bulb moment. And I've had that experience in face-to-face real life. I go to teach a class. Most of my classroom sizes are anywhere from 12 to 16 or 18. Some of those classes are in an auditorium, and I've had hundreds of people, but that's unusual. It's very unusual. When I'm expecting a class of 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, but there's no shows, and I've got 2 people in class, it's like, okay, you guys are here. You guys are the important ones. Yeah. Now, certain classes that I teach require more people because of the participation stuff, so we have to reschedule. But if I'm putting on a presentation and only that one person shows up, that's the person you're talking to.
And they get more valuable time with you because they don't have to share your attention with anyone. So it's actually a very valuable experience for them as a listener. So in a world where everyone's looking at, well, I got to have, 100,000 listens in 7 minutes or I'm not a success. I'm like, what happened to the one? What can't we celebrate the one listener who came and we get to pour into them and have a connection with them? I'm all about celebrating the small. I really don't understand why people struggle with such low numbers and saying, "Oh, Dave, I only have 10 listens to my episode." Wow. Like, that's incredible. You have 10 listens? Like, why can't we be excited about that? I don't understand why people are nervous or shy about sharing that number, because the potential is there for your listens to grow over time if you just keep showing up. Absolutely.
And with Ton of Questions podcast, there's a wide variation. Like, I'm looking at my list. So I started out, I've got my introduction, but I talk about vehicle manufacturing, I talk about romance scams, DDT, and how they, where they spray it, those types of things.
Yeah.
It's a wide assortment. I'm not going to get somebody who is interested in one particular thing, and then they're going to listen to all of them. They might be searching for DDT and come across my episode number 5 and 6 and listen to it and then not come back. Or they might go, well, I was looking about DDT, but then there's this thing about nuclear power, and what's that about?
Right.
And so my target audience is the curious person.
Yeah.
And so that's a difficult one to talk to. But if there's one curious person out there, then welcome aboard.
Yeah. It's kind of that Trivial Pursuit type thing. Make you really smart at work. Listen to my show, and you can blow everybody away at break time with all the information that you've learned on my podcast.
Yeah. Right. Well, there's also there's the other side of it, and I think I'm it may have crossed the line. So with my episodes 7, 8, and 9, 7 and 8 have been released. 9 will be coming out Monday morning. I think I get a little bit too deep in the weeds on it, and I think I might put people to sleep. But it'll be out there. If there's somebody who wants to listen to it, then by all means. And the biggest thing about that one is with nuclear power. So this area, Southeast Idaho, the largest employer in the area is the U.S. Department of Energy. And this whole area is specialized on nuclear. So if there's, a friend of mine on Facebook whose kid is in 11th grade wondering what he wants to do with his life, and he hears this nuclear power thing and he digs into it, and that sparks some curiosity, and that puts his path into the nuclear career.
Right.
Score. Right. Yeah. I'm jumping up and down, and we're good. We are good. Then everything that I've done has been worth it. Right. And that comes down to that's the why. That's the gut check why.
And I've had that experience just with the show, and people reaching out from across the globe saying because of the show, because of How to Podcast, now they have their own show and they wouldn't have had it. And I'm like, that is such a great feeling to know that we're duplicating and multiplying our audience, not just in listeners, but people taking action and starting a show based on, the great co-hosts that I have on and all the other things we do here, is they've now have the experience and the knowledge and the courage to start their show. That is so cool that we're duplicating and multiplying. I get so excited when I hear those messages come in.
Yeah. And it blew my mind. I think I heard it on your show that not very many people know even what a podcast is. Yeah. I know I've known what they are for a long time. And I guess I just assumed that everybody knew, but just in my experience when sharing, and I've not gone shouting it from the rooftops yet. I want to get it on iTunes. I want to get it on all the distribution networks, and then I'll make a hard launch. Yeah. But I talked to some people and they're like, what's a podcast?
Exactly. Yeah. I have family members and they're like, so what are you doing now? And I'm like, well, I'm podcasting. They're like, I don't get it. What are you doing? Like, is it a radio show? What is this? I don't understand. And it feels weird because I'm in a world full of podcasters like you, and we get it. We know what we're doing. And then I step outside of that world and I'm in front of people who have no clue about any of this. And you have to break it down really simple terms about what it is and how much does it cost to listen to a podcast. You're like, it's free. What are you talking about? Free? There's nothing free in this world. You're like, okay, let me give me your phone and actually show them what it looks like on their phone. They're like, oh, I didn't even know what that button was for. You're like, oh, good. We have a new listener to podcast. So all I do is I say, hey, what's your favorite thing in this world? Oh, I love submarines. Oh, just give me your phone for a second. You got to check out Anthony's podcast. And I'm like, click it and I hit follow. And I'm like, there you go. You want to hear everything about submarines? This episode right here. Check out this podcast. And then I just give them their phone back. And they're listening to it and they're like, this is amazing. So anything you can find. So even if they don't listen to your show, grab your neighbor's phone, your friend's phone, whatever. You're out with your friends. You're like, hey, do you listen to podcasts? No. Give me your phone for a second. Let me show you how easy this is. And just show them so you can navigate and get them into the podcasting space. And the more listeners we get, the better. Right? So I love talking to podcasters, but I also love talking to people who have a sweet clue about anything that we do and bringing them into.
Well, I've already got the conversation planned for when it goes this way. Hey, I started a new podcast. Oh, I've always thought about starting my own podcast. How did you learn how to do that? Well, let me see your phone.
There you go. I love it. Okay, so Anthony, from your perspective, for a new listener, maybe their first time to this show, or a new podcaster that's thinking about starting a show, what would you have liked to have heard early days for your podcast that we can share now with the person who's listening? Maybe they're hearing our voices for the very first time today. From your perspective and what you know, because you're doing it, what would you say to them about how they start their show and where's the starting point for the next podcaster?
Just hit record. Have you recorded anything? Pull out your phone. There's tons of apps on. I use Spotify for to distribute mine.
Yeah,
I can use the app. When I open it up if I want to go look at my stats or whatever, there's another button. and I can press the button. It will put music on there for you that is, you know, available for you to use. Just hit record. I can get into detailitis and okay, I got to set this email up. I've got to put that plug in on the WordPress. I got to download this app. I got to just hit record. It's like one of my speak pipes over to you.
Yes, it was.
Driving down the road, and I had a list of things that I needed to do, and none of them involved recording anything. I heard that, and have you hit record today? I was like, okay, I got to get the things I need to do for I need to finish adulting for today, and then I'm going to go up in the hill. And I recorded so many things. So just hit record. You probably won't have a masterpiece your first episode. I go back. I'm only 10 episodes into this, but I go back and I listen to my episode 1. I'm like, oh, I need to re-record that. And another thing that I learned from you is you can go back and update a previous episode, right? If you found something that you could do better, or you learned a new method with your microphone to make it sound better, which I did. Oh, I renamed my podcast. That's right. I had to go back and re-record and edit all of the intros for every single episode that I did.
Yeah.
And so I just made that happen. In fact, that was one of the things that I came up on the hill that day when I heard you say, have you recorded anything today? Okay, let's get busy. So if I'm talking to somebody who's listening to this podcast thinking, can I do it? Yes, you can. Do I have the gear? If you have a cell phone, is it going to sound as good as a $9 gajillion microphone? No. Will it sound as good as a $50 microphone? Maybe not. Get the $50 microphone. I'm using a $90 microphone. It's a Blue Yeti. Most people turn their noses up when you say Blue Yeti. They go, ew, oh, that's a USB mic. Who cares? Exactly. Plug it in and hit record. Do I have my eyes on other gear? Yeah. Am I pressing, the buy it now button on some retailer? No, because this works great. If I land a deal and, I make a couple $100, maybe I'll put it into my microphone. Just hit record. That's what I needed to hear. Had I heard that advice way back when I thought, oh, it'd be interesting to start a podcast, I'd be a year plus into this rather than a couple months into this.
That's amazing. And that episode in particular, Anthony, was actually recorded for a client friend of mine. His name is Wayne. And he emails me and texts me probably 3 or 4 times a week. He's like, oh, I really need to get started. I want to get my website going. And I'm like, Wayne, and I keep saying to him, have you recorded anything? No, I'm at the gym. And I've really got some great ideas. I got some ideas for shirts. I'm going to do the shirts. I'm going to do the website. And I'm like, Wayne, have you recorded anything? And he's like, yeah, I'm going to get to that. I'm like, okay, you're not. And it actually came to me while I was talking to somebody. And I said to them, you're not a bungee jumper until you jump. And I'm like, you can study all you want. You can buy all the gear. You can do everything. But until you leap off that bungee platform for the first time, you are not a bungee jumper. You're a bungee expert. So you can be a podcast expert, but you're not a podcaster until you hit record. So do it. Just do the jump. Like, you got to jump. That's the first thing, the first step in becoming a podcaster is record something. And then you can go from there. An author has to write words on a paper or on their computer screen. You have to start somewhere. And you can't edit a blank piece of paper. So you have to start. As terrible as it sounds or looks in the beginning, if you don't start, you can't progress. So you just need to start.
Correct. That's another aspect of, and maybe this might be something that you might want to consider venturing into. One of the things that I want to do with my microphone is narrate audiobooks. And I've done, I don't know, maybe a dozen ACX auditions. And I've gotten declined every single one of them, but I'm also brand new. I've heard other people who have submitted hundreds of ACX auditions before they got their first job.
Yeah.
So it's this type of thing that will get you there. Another idea popped into my head. I've heard a couple of times where your other guests and co-hosts have said, hey, have you ever thought about doing a live show? And when I think about doing a live show, my head starts twitching because there's so many moving parts.
Right.
But there's a soft piece of software. It's open source. It's free. It's called OBS. I think it's Open Broadcast Studio. Are you familiar with it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it would be a blast. And this is just something for you to consider. This would be a blast to get you, me, and maybe a third person to run OBS, bring all of our videos together. We could do a live audio and video stream if that fancy tickled us. And with 3 people running it connected through the internet, I think we could pull off the tech.
There you go. That sounds like a challenge. I like that. It's amazing. Okay, so I'm kept you a long time. You got recording to do for your own show. I have one more question for you at the end, but Anthony, tell us again where we find your show and all that information so that we can come and support you and your podcast.
Well, thank you for that. It is the Ton of Questions podcast. I am currently on Spotify, Google, Cable. Oh, I've got my list right here. I am on Phil. Where are my podcast distribution? Sorry. I'm working on getting on Apple Podcasts. That
Right.
is a beast to be reckoned with. Spotify, Podcast Addict, Audible, Castbox, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and another outfit I'd never heard of, Pocket Casts. But I'm on all of those, soon to be hopefully where I can say on anywhere where you can listen to podcasts, the Ton of Questions podcast. Also, you can find me at tonofquestions.com.
Nice. Excellent. See, that's great branding. I love that. Yeah. And there's another one called Afropods. Afropods is in Africa. They're looking for English-speaking podcasts on Afropods, AFRIPODS. There's also 2 in India, Geo7, it's called, and Ghana. But those are 2. They're looking for English-speaking podcasts as well, and that's in India. So, again, those won't show in your Spotify for Podcaster download stats because it's outside of where they pull reports from. But just that's another place to be. And if you can be there for free, you should be there. Samsung is another one. You should be on Samsung for podcasters. So everyone with a Samsung phone has a built-in app for podcasts on their device. They also can play your podcast on their refrigerators, a Samsung refrigerator, so you can be in your kitchen listening to your podcast while you're making breakfast, playing from the refrigerator. So that's pretty cool. And it's free to set up. So go on Samsung as well. That's another one where you can be.
Now, how do you crack the nut on YouTube? I know I've heard your episodes about get a still image. With Google Podcast is saying, hey, we're going away mid-2024,
Yep.
but we're going to make it all YouTube with just one. They are talking about you, and you said something the same about making it a playlist.
So take your podcast. So you have a YouTube channel for your podcast at this point? Okay. So when you have a chance, go check out mine on YouTube for my How to Podcast series and look at how it's set up. What you can do, anytime that you like a video on YouTube, you can click a button that says watch later, and it just puts it in a little playlist, right? And you can come back there and see all the things you haven't watched yet, and you'd want to watch them later. That's a playlist. You can create your own playlist for your podcast and call it the name of your show. And what they want then is you create the playlist, put some podcast episodes in there, put this episode in there. So once this goes out live, you're going to see it, click the little save to button on YouTube and send it to that playlist that you call the name of your podcast. And then this episode that you and I are doing right now will show up in that playlist. You can then take that playlist and rebrand it, rename it as a podcast. There's a couple steps, and I actually have a video on my channel that you could put up on your screen and watch. And I do all the steps, and you just do what I do. Copy here, click here, do this. Yeah, it's really easy laid out. I try to make it as super simple as possible. And then once it comes to your part of the world, it's not everywhere right now. 6 of my 7 shows have access to this, where the same RSS feed, for those listening at home or wondering what I just said, that's basically your address to all your audio files or video files for your podcast. That RSS feed that sends your podcast out into the world to Apple and Google and Audible and all those places can now also be connected directly to YouTube. So when I hit post to my host on Spotify for Podcasters, when I hit post, about 10 to 20 minutes later, this episode's on YouTube. And I didn't have to do anything. It just automatically goes. And all I get is I get an audio, I get image, just a picture with the audio attached. No video. I don't have this set up for video right now. I just get the audio only. And on YouTube Music, which is a separate app from YouTube as a whole, on YouTube Music, there's a spot now for podcasts. So you can hit play on a podcast. You can minimize your phone or close your phone screen off, which would normally on YouTube stop the play. It now continues. You can put your phone in your pocket and you can listen to audio podcasts, just like you can on Spotify. But you can now do it on YouTube Music. So your podcast will show up there. So what's amazing is that all that stuff happens in the background and you don't have to do anything after you set it up the first time. So the first step, create your YouTube channel, create a playlist, and then rebrand that playlist as a podcast. And you're done. And follow the steps, and you can see that on my channel on how to do that.
Awesome. More nuggets that I was unaware of.
See? So the one thing I'm talking about this month, I did a 5-part series on making money with your podcast. Now, the idea behind this was I wanted to do something for people who are starting out, who are doing this all on their own, paying for everything themselves, and we have a small audience. How can we make some money with our show? And I want to encourage you that you can make money with your show as well, Anthony, simply by putting things out to make it easy for your audience to contribute. And one of the sayings that I use in these 5 episodes is, we don't have because we don't ask. And I think as podcasters, we need to let people know that there are some expenses. There are some things we do have to buy. If you want to buy a microphone, you have to pay for the microphone. If you're going to pay for hosting, you got to pay for hosting. So there are some things we pay for that our audience may be completely unaware of because the podcast is free to listen to. So it must be free to make. Well, there's your time. There's a bunch of things going on, right? So one of the things I put up a Buy Me a Coffee. And it's on buymeacoffee.com, and you can set it up for free, and you get a little address, a little link to you or your show, however you want to brand it. And then put that in your email signature, put that on your website, put that in your show notes in each episode, and just say, hey, if you love what's happening on the podcast and you can help sponsor the show, I would love if you just reach out and buy me a coffee. And I have it set at $5 increments. And last week, somebody bought me 25 coffees. Out of the blue, just showed up in an email, here's 25 coffees. And I'm like, what the heck? My wife was like, what just happened? I'm like, you're getting flowers. That's what happened. So she was pretty excited. So put it out there and don't be afraid to talk about it. Because again, if your listeners don't realize that you need some help with that, even if it's $5 is great. That's amazing. That could put some gas in the car. They could do something. Could help with something, right? So let your audience know. So that's a little 5-part mini-series that I did here in November to encourage you that even if you're just starting out and you only have a certain number of episodes, you can make some money back in small amounts. And if you let your audience know, they would probably love to support you. Because you'd be surprised how much people identify with you, you become part of their habits, and they want to give back. So give them the easy way to do that by simply doing something like Buy Me a Coffee. So something I would encourage you to look at, just so that I can then, as a listener of your show with my hand raised, I now, part of your community, can give back to you for all the great things that you give to us. Because I know, Anthony, you're not just turning on the mic and just talking in the air. You do a lot of research. You know what you're talking about. You have an expertise that I don't have. I get value from you by listening to your show. I get smarter by listening to your podcast. So I want to then give back to you and say, Anthony, I appreciate you and what you do. I want to encourage you. And even if it's only $5, when you see that email come in and say your listener just gave you $5, you're like, wait a minute. That is amazing, because not only did they give you $5, now you have their email address that you can say thank you to them. And now you have that bridge built where you can now start communicating with your listener and build a relationship with them, because they've already taken the first step. They've shot across the bow and they've given you that donation. Now you have the opportunity to engage with them and show your love and your appreciation for your audience. So set up your Buy Me a Coffee so I can buy you a coffee, Anthony. Okay, I'm giving you a gentle nudge, but you need to do that so I can help support you. Okay.
Oh, you have been so supportive. Your episodes, everything has been amazing.
Yeah. Now it's time to put some money in your pocket, though. I want to help you out. Okay. So set it up. Let me know. You give me a SpeakPipe message back. And then this is my challenge that I did. Part of the 5-part series is I want you to call back to SpeakPipe, say the name of your show, give us the whole blurb, and then give us your Buy Me a Coffee link. What is it? buymeacoffee.com/ mine's True Media CA. True Media CA. If anyone's listening, you want to buy me a coffee? buymeacoffee.com/ True Media CA. And then you can have my link to my Buy Me a Coffee. Do that. I would love that. Because what I'm doing is taking the money you give me, buying flowers for my wife, or I'm going to send it over to Anthony and support his show. I'm just going to recycle that. So that's kind of the idea behind this. So you donate to me, I'm just going to give it to Anthony. So that's kind of how it works. So that's kind of how what I'm doing. But you say it and keep saying it over and over again. Become your own little commercial. And it feels weird. It really feels odd to say that, because we just want to give to people. But at the same time, people want to give back. It's like when you go to a job interview and they ask you if you want a glass of water. They're doing it because they genuinely want to. They want to be nice to you, even though they just met you. And if you turn it down all the time, they're like, no, it's fine. It's like, oh, I was trying to do something nice. Accept the water. Just accept, try, right? And put it out there in the world. Because I think you'll be surprised, Anthony, at the response. People want to give to you and they want to support you. So that's my challenge for you as we're closing off, is to set that up as soon as you can, okay? I feel like I'm being very, very preachy, but I want to see you keep going with this, Anthony, because you got a gift. I appreciate it. So everyone, all the information's in the show notes for Anthony. I'll give you the last word, Anthony. How do you want to close off?
I just would like to thank you at the How To Podcast series, to thank all of your listeners for supporting you. Appreciate anybody who might want to pop over to tonofquestions.com or check me out on Audible, Spotify, or any of the others. Come on over and take a listen and see what questions I can answer.
I love it. It's a great show, everyone. Go check it out. Anthony's an amazing person. He's full of encouragement. And like I said, anytime I get an email with a voice message attached through SpeakPipe from Anthony, it's a good day. It's a really good day. Anthony, thank you so much for being part of the show. And you got to come back and let us know how things are going. And I'm expecting a response on SpeakPipe with your link to your Buy Me a Coffee, okay? All right, everyone. All the information in the show notes. If you want to come on the show and be a part of this as well and share your journey as a podcaster like Anthony, I'd love to have you on and encourage you to reach out. howtopodcast.ca. Thanks, Anthony. Hey, so you've made it this far. You made it to the end of the episode. Congratulations. I'm going to find a prize somewhere and get it to you. Thank you so much for checking out the episodes. What I love is having listeners on the show and talking about your podcast journey. And you're thinking, Dave, I would love to come on your show, but, I haven't actually hit record yet. But I have a great idea for a podcast. I'll wait until I have my podcast up and running before I reach out. And I say to you, why wait? why not come on now and let's talk through your journey and then have you come back in the future and celebrate the launch of your show. Reach out to me, howtopodcast.ca, and let's get you on the podcast. I just love interacting with you. And what makes me happy is I get to see the numbers. I get to know that there's someone listening, but I would much rather speak with you one-on-one like we've done here with Anthony. That is something that gives me a lot of joy. So if you would love to come on the show, howtopodcast.ca. And if you're a little nervous, which is okay, go to howtopodcast.ca and use the SpeakPipe link on my website. Record a short audio message, and I'll put your message in the podcast so we can hear your beautiful podcast voice. Let's encourage each other. Let's build up a community of fans, friends, and family. Ooh, I like that. Fans, friends, and family. Remember that one. All around podcasting. And we want to include you. So whether you haven't started yet or you've been doing this forever, howtopodcast.ca. Catch you over there. Thanks for listening. See you next time.